Hello? Hello? Welcome back to Devlog. In the last part, I worked on stackable objects, and in this part, I work on idle fidget logic. Firstly, to explain what an idle fidget is, because you might not know. An idle fidget is a method in animation in games where if the player is held idle for too long, they will start to move around or play a fidget animation. It's called an idle fidget because it's the player fidgeting about as they stood still, but it can be any amount of different bodily motions that you would want. Essentially, it's an animation that's played as the player is just idling, just to give more variety to the player's movements and how they look, how the idle animation looks. The reason for adding it in this method is because the idle animation is firstly very plain, it's just the player wobbling around a little bit, and I need to have these be animations that you could blend into randomly, first of all to give variety so it isn't just seeming like a very long animation where the character automatically blends into the same idle fidgets just based on a very long animation, and also because some of these animations are very complicated based on the player movement, and I can't have these be a regular idle animation because that would mean that these idle animations have to also blend into the walk cycle, which a lot of them don't. So I made the system to have the player organically idle fidget about. Okay, so this is a really simple system to add. I'm pretty much just making this video because I found it interesting, and also because I was asked recently how one would go about making an idle animation fidget system. Here's how I do it. When the player is not moving and has no momentum applying to them, so they are perfectly still and also on the ground, a timer will tick down. This timer is randomized between 12 and 24 seconds. If the player starts to move again, this timer will be further randomized to a higher number if it has already ticked down below 12. So if the timer was set to 14, we were idle for 4 seconds. The animation timer will now be at 10 seconds. If we start moving again, it will be randomized again. The reason for this is so the idle animation timer is not at a very low number the second we stop moving. So the player isn't engaging in an idle fidget the second they stop moving, and there is at least some level of time between stopping moving, stopping pressing inputs, and idle fidgeting. Once this timer has ticked to 0, we will transition into an idle fidget animation. This is just done manually with the player crossfading into an animation and then randomizing which of these animations the player crossfades into. Very easy, I just do a random number between 0 and the number of idle fidgets that we have, and then I crossfade into the idle fidget animation plus number. And that plays the animation. That's the entirety of the system. It's really easy. Once again, through the joys of substate systems, this is made very easy because I can always detect if the player is moving, if the player is moving quickly, what the player's speed is, and what if the player is in a state where they can be idle fidgeted. So, in states such as in midair, or on a rope, or on a wall, I can organically test that the player does not need to idle fidget and not even run this function when the player is in those states. It's very, very easy. But that's it, that's the entirety of the system. Devlog over, bye. Let's talk about the animations themselves. A lot of these are just animations I made for fun that don't really have a whole lot of organic movements, but I think look silly. The first of these is probably the most fidget one, is the player leaning down, scratching their nose or face, and then leaning back up. The player leans down, they scratch their nose, they lean back up. It is a very simple animation, but I think it's perfectly good for showing off what an idle fidget is. It's just the player doing this very base action just to make it seem like they have more organic movement in their character. I think the movement of this animation looks very nice. It feels very smooth, at least to me, and it's just a very easy looking animation. It looks very organic in game. It looks like the kind of thing the player would naturally do. The second idle fidget is the player wobbling back on their feet. This is another idle fidget that I felt was more silly looking, more cartoonish, more clown-like, but I like how it looks. This is an animation that I mostly mostly made just because I wanted to make this animation. I just felt like the idea of the character wobbling back on her feet would look nice, and it does. It's just a funny little animation of the character doing a little wibbly wobbly. There's some nice movement to the arms, there's some nice movement to the hair, it has a nice weight to the character actually wobbling back and forth. I think this animation is pretty nice. What do you think? Leave a comment. The third idle fidget is my least favorite, but I also kind of like it. The player is bouncing about and then she wiggles her arms around. I don't know why I made this one. I guess this is what I do when I'm bored. I wiggle my arms sometimes. That's your slug glove fact of the day. I like to wiggle my arms around. There's no real organic movement to this. It's not supposed to read as a thing of like Sonic doing his leg stretchies in his idle fidgets. In the Sonic games there's an idle fidget where Sonic stretches his legs. It's not like that where the player is supposed to look at this and think, wow, that's an organic bodily movement that the player sure is making. I can understand what she's doing in this frame. This seems like a normal thing a human would do. It's supposed to look odd and cartoonish, and mostly just kind of silly. You see this and you think, wow, she sure is a little freak that I'm playing as. She sure is a little freak girl. Boy, I sure do love her. Boy, I wish I could squeeze her with my big meaty palm. The final animation is the most complicated one. I think it looks a bit stiff, but for what it is, I think it reads nice and looks interesting enough. This is the player taking off her hat, inflating it like a little balloon, like she does in her double jump logic, hint hint, and then the balloon deflates. I think it has some nice motion when played in game. The balloon deflating, I think, looks pretty good, and the balloon inflating itself, this is her blowing up her balloon, despite the fact that the character has no mouth. So I guess she just puts it over her nose and inflates it with her nose. Look, don't think too logically about this animation, it just looks pretty. The body has a little bit of stiffness to it that I'm probably going to fix, maybe, who knows, maybe I'll get lazy and not do that. But I think overall the animation looks very nice, it reads very nicely as to what the player is actually doing, unlike the other animations. You can look at this animation and think, I know what she's doing in this animation, she's making a funny balloon, like a clown, like a clownish imp. So it reads nice, animation good. And that's basically it for all the animations, the way the system is coded. All I have to do, if I want to add more idle fidgets, which I almost assuredly will, because they're funny to animate for, is I just change a value of 3 to a value of 4, or a value of 5, or a value of 6. You get the idea. It's very easy to just adapt this system and add more idle fidgets as and when I need to use an idle fidget. And that's it for Devlog. This is a very niche topic for a devlog that really doesn't need one, because I think it is overall pretty self-explanatory or very easy to just Google how one would make such a system if you're trying to figure out how to do it, and then looking at a list of things and thinking, oh, I'll probably do that. But I think it is interesting to talk about. I like idle fidgets in videos games, I think it is a useful thing, and I think for a video game like mine, where there is so much design for the player character to look unique and cartoonish, it really lends itself for the player to have a goofy little idle fidget setup. In popular videos games that are more serious, like Elden Ring, this is my excuse to talk about Elden Ring, there really isn't any idle fidgets that I have noticed, and that's because it would look silly in the game, and the game is not silly, but my game is silly. So idle fidgets added. And that's it for Devlog. I promise the next one will be about something complicated, probably, and